Hi, you guys. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Mr. Lewis, for asking me to come and talk about our business and just all of the things that we love about being wedding photographers. When I say we, I am referring to my husband and I. We run a photo video business together, but I'm just going to be the one talking to you today. Carly and Beau Photo and Cinema, or Photo and Video, is our wedding and portrait side of our business. But we have a corporate side as well, where we do a lot of commercial work and corporate shooting and branding for different companies and businesses, and that is called CB Creative. So you can look us up online. We're on Instagram. We've got our website, Vimeo, lots of different places. If Mr. Lewis hasn't had a chance to share that with you, maybe he can do that, and then you can just see what we do. I loved the questions that you guys submitted. They were all really fun to look through, and I'm really excited to get to answer them for you. And I'm gonna try to keep it short and sweet so this doesn't end up being an hour long, but there are definitely some questions on here I feel like I could talk about for a really long time. So one of the first questions that was on there is, how long have you been shooting? I have been shooting since 2008, so it's been a little over 13 years. I actually got started the same way that a lot of you guys are, getting started, just in high school. I took a graphic communications class that introduced me to Adobe programs like Photoshop, and I started shooting some digital photography then. After I graduated high school, I went down to Utah State and I started the photography program down there, did some black and white film and some other creative classes, but ended up moving back home and going to the College of Southern Idaho in Twin Falls. And I decided to go into business rather than do photography as a major, because I felt like learning the business side of things was more important than the photography side, just from what I was seeing and experiencing in the industry. And I'm really glad I actually went that route, because there's so much that we need to know about learning how to run a business that wasn't getting taught in those photography courses at the time. And so much of learning photography is just getting out and practicing in trial and error. So that is how I got started, and that is how long I've been shooting. When was the moment you knew you wanted to be a wedding photographer? It was my very first wedding. I had actually only graduated high school a month before. My sister-in-law happened to be the maid of honor. Well, she's my now sister-in-law, then she wasn't, but she was the maid of honor of a wedding, and the bride's photographer bailed like 3 or 4 days before the wedding. And I had been getting into photography and had been doing some, photo shoots here and there for friends and stuff. And she just was like, hey, do you want to come shoot Amber's wedding? Their photographer bailed last minute. They were going to pay her $500 to be here for, 5 or 6 hours. And I was like, yeah, sure. That sounds awesome. And I went. It was kind of a disaster. Not necessarily on my part, but just the family dynamics. There was a lot with divorces and a lot of people just not getting along, and it was crazy and chaotic and straight chaos, but I loved every second of it. And I just got bit with a bug that was something that I really wanted to do. And that was the moment I knew I wanted to be a wedding photographer. Even though I left that wedding feeling like that was a circus, it was just something I knew I wanted to continue to do. How do you deal with bridezillas? Has anyone ever asked you to leave their wedding? Are people ever mean to you? This is a great question, and I get this one all the time. So I can probably count over the hundreds of weddings that I've shot over the last decade, plus. Maybe 5 brides that just left me feeling a little bit, uneasy. But for the most part, all of our brides have been wonderful. We have never really had any circumstances or situations where we've had, issues or altercations. Brides are rarely ever mean to us. They might be bridezillas to their family or other people at the wedding, but they've never to us, at least not to our faces. We have had some moms that have been really bad. I've had a couple instances where I have had interactions with mothers of the bride and mothers of the groom that have left me in tears. So it's rarely, if ever, the bride, but a lot of times it can be the moms. And we've had a couple of grooms that have been pretty mean to us. Not ever really anything that's left, it to the point where we like don't want to do this again, and there's usually not a valid reason for it. Sometimes it's just the heightened emotions of the day and they need to like take it out on somebody. But for the most part, no, we've never had anybody ask us to leave. We've never had anything like that. Any of the altercations or any of the situations that we've had, have never actually been like at a wedding or on the wedding day. Everything for the most part is run really smooth. I can't honestly think of a specific time that we've had an issue on a wedding day that I felt made us really uncomfortable. What are some difficult shots to get during weddings? This is a really great question because it can differ depending on the wedding. You know, some weddings they make things really easy, and then other weddings it seems like we are just like fighting an uphill battle all day long. We've had a lot of instances where, you know, weather comes into play, and that is something that you just can't control, and we're having to change situations last minute and because of the weather. One of the biggest struggles that we typically find on a wedding day is when the timeline gets off, when we start to run really behind. That's when things can get really difficult, because then we're having to cram in things, or we're having to, you know, say we don't have time for this anymore, or make our couples pick and choose, like, would you rather do this than this, because we don't have time for everything. But definitely like during the ceremony, you know, that is something that you just can't redo. So making sure that you are prepared and set up for the first kiss. You are prepared to see the bride coming down the aisle. You're prepared to get the groom's reaction to her coming down the aisle. I mean, all of those things are definitely the hardest moments to capture. I personally feel like everything up until the ceremony, I feel a little bit more on edge. As soon as the ceremony is over, I feel like the weight is off of my shoulders. A big deep breath happens, and it's like, okay, we're through the hardest part. A lot of our couples choose to do what we call first looks these days. And so they're seeing each other before the ceremony. We're able to knock out all the wedding party, all the family pictures prior to the ceremony. And so usually by the time the ceremony's over, it's just time to party and have fun. And a lot of the main stuff is out of the way. I prefer to do things that way because it just makes the day flow better. But of course, our couples get, you know, the final say in whether or not they would like to do a first look, or if they want to stay traditional and wait to see each other coming down the aisle. And either way, we can make that work. On average, how many photos do you shoot per event? So this again is just going to depend. Every wedding is a little bit different. Some weddings were there for 6 hours. Some weddings were there for 12 hours. Some couples have 10 people in there, you know, 10 bridesmaids, 10 groomsmen, and other people just have maybe like one bridesmaid, one groomsman. Some people have really big families. Some people have really small families. So I always tell my couples that I can't guarantee a specific number of shots because every wedding is a little different. I believe in quality over quantity. So I never want to just be delivering images that are subpar simply because I told them they receive a certain amount. But I will never like withhold images if they're wonderful or they're great, you know. So on average, I'm probably shooting anywhere from like 3,000 to 4,000 photos on a wedding day. That's pretty typical. And then my couples are usually getting delivered anywhere from, you know, 800 to maybe like 1,000, maybe a little over 1,000 pictures from a wedding day. Again, just depending on the size of the wedding, how long we were there, etc. Is it expensive to get started shooting weddings? Again, this kind of question just depends. You can spend a lot of money and you can get a really good setup, or you can start a lot smaller and simpler. I, you know, started out with just a kit camera package that my parents got me for graduation, and I shot with that setup for a couple of years. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that to anyone. Looking back now, I feel like I got really lucky with the equipment that I had. You know, I wasn't shooting with a backup camera. I wasn't, you know, doing some of those things that I personally suggest that you absolutely need to have now. But again, it worked out for me at the time. So if I was to suggest to somebody how to get started with getting equipment and getting started with shooting with weddings, I would suggest, number one, to stay out of debt. Don't get yourself in a bunch of debt with equipment because you're already just going to be behind trying to pay off debt in order to get your business going. And it's already hard enough to run a business, so you don't want to start in the hole. The second thing I would suggest is to stay actually away from kits. a lot of times they have things in there that you honestly don't really even need, that you're never going to use. You're going to get a bunch of accessories and stuff that honestly aren't even useful. And a lot of times those kit lenses aren't going to give you that look that you want. You know, this like really creamy bokeh background that a lot of people are looking for that professional look in their pictures. You're not going to get that very well with a kit lens because your aperture only goes down to maybe like a 5.6 or a 4.0. So I would suggest finding a camera body that's within a good price range, that has, you know, good reviews and good quality, and then getting some sort of prime lens or a little bit maybe more expensive lens to go on that camera body that gives you a little bit more versatility as far as shooting. So something that goes down to like a 2 point something or a 1.8. One of my very first lenses that I got after the kit camera that I had was, it was like $100 50 millimeter. I think it's like a 50 millimeter 1.8. And I had that lens and it lived on my camera for probably like 3 or 4 years. I loved that lens and it was literally only $100. So that would be my suggestion to anybody who's wanting to get set up. Get a good like 50 millimeter cheap prime 1.8 lens and a decent camera body, and you can actually do a lot with that. Obviously, there are times where you're gonna want like a zoom and things, but your feet can be a zoom. You can run in and out, you can move your body to get different things. And I just think that my personal suggestion is that's a good place to start. What is your weirdest experience while shooting? Well, there is always one, if we have time for a story, there's always one situation that really just makes me, it's the one that always pops into my head. It was when I was first getting started. I hadn't been shooting for maybe like 3 or 4 years, and I had a couple that decided to do an engagement session with me. And we decided to meet at this gas station. They wanted to go to this location that I had never been to. And so I was like, well, I'll follow you guys. And so we meet up, and just their attire and what they showed up in was very surprising to me for what I typically am used to seeing people wear for engagement pictures. But I was trying not to be judgmental because everybody gets to do their own thing. But I just thought it was a little odd, like what they were wearing. It didn't seem dressed up, you know, for pictures. Anyways, so I follow them out. It took us like an hour to get to this place that I knew wasn't that far away. So I was very confused as to why it took us so long. And when we got there, the guy jumps out of the car and was like, oh, sorry, I decided to take the longer route because I wanted to show her where such and such was. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, why did you, like, I didn't need to go on that drive. Anyways, so I'm like, that's okay, you know, whatever. So then they changed their clothes and they put on matching t-shirts that had puzzle pieces on them that said something like matching perfectly or perfectly matching. And they wore these matching puzzle piece t-shirts for their engagement session. And it was just weird. It was a very, very weird session. Their dynamic was interesting. They were extremely physical. Without going into too much detail, there was just a lot of things happening that it was very weird and very uncomfortable. That was probably, honestly, still to this day, one of the weirdest photo sessions I've ever done. And here it's been, 10 years later, and it's still the one that pops into my head regularly. So other than that, I wouldn't say that we've had a lot of weird experiences. We've had some pretty crazy situations with like weather and different things like that. I like I said, I could talk about this stuff for forever, so I won't make this too long. How do you effectively not make people look awkward? So this is a really, really great question. And I feel like this is where people really struggle when it comes to shooting portraits and shooting people, because we can get into ruts when it comes to posing that makes both ourselves and our clients feel really uncreative, feel really stiff. And without having experience in our back pocket, it can be really uncomfortable to know just how to pose your clients. So first off, it takes practice. You're gonna just have to do it a lot. And the more that you do it, the more you're gonna start to develop your own style, your own communication, your own, terminology, the way that you talk to your clients to get them to do certain things. You're gonna just develop that the more that you practice. But one of my favorite things is to constantly use movement in my shoots. And so it's easy where we shoot video as well, because my husband is obviously wanting a lot of video or a lot of movement for his videos. And so we're constantly having our couples, walk and spin and just move around in different ways so that we're getting some nice fluid movement. But when we do things like that, your clients are going to feel less stiff. They're going to feel more natural. And so a lot of times what I will do is if I start them in a pose, I will then flow through different poses and different things. So for example, if I have them standing facing me with their arm around each other, looking at the camera for a few pictures, and then I have them look towards each other for a few, it's like, okay, now I want you guys to look towards each other. Okay, now John, I want you to take your right hand and I want you to wrap it around, Sarah's back, and Sarah, I want you to take that left arm, I want you to put it back up around his neck, and okay, now you guys are getting really cuddly and close, so now let's go ahead and let's move our noses close together, and you know what I mean? So it's not just like a shoot, stop, turn, whatever. I'm constantly shooting while I'm talking, and this is helping them to flow through different hand movements, different positions, get closer, pull apart. I might have them kiss or whatever it might be, instead of me having them drop between everything. And that is something that I'll actually have to coach my clients when we first get started. I tell them, unless I tell you to move, I want you to stay exactly how I have you. So if I have you guys wrapped up with your arms around each other until I tell you that that's good, we're done or whatever, I just want you to stay there. Because a lot of times if I'm shooting and I stop to check something or I'm moving myself, the couples will immediately drop and look at me and be like, okay, what's next? And it's like, no, just go ahead and stay there. Just continue to be, snuggled up with each other. And that's their comfort zone. They're feeling uncomfortable a lot of times. That most of the clients that I get have never had professional pictures done. They've never, been in front of a camera, especially together. And so they are looking for that guidance. So don't tell your couple to just act natural. That is one of the worst things that you can tell them, because what does that mean? They don't know. And so instead of telling them to act natural, give them cues of things to do. Have them place their hand here. Have them do this with their hand. Have them get their faces closer. Maybe have them pull away. And then as you start to get comfortable with your posing and your shooting style, you can start to implement a lot more fun things. A lot of times, we'll have our couples do different things just so we can get laughs. We'll have them whisper something in their ear, or we'll have them say a silly joke, or we'll say a joke that just gets them laughing. But that is just something that comes with practice, and it's not something that a lot of people are able to get just right off of the bat. How do you deal with people that want to try and control everything? Okay, yes, this is something that can be really, really tricky, especially on a wedding day. When you are there doing your thing and you've got maybe a mom, maybe it's the bride, maybe it's a bridesmaid, maybe it's the wedding coordinator, maybe it's an aunt, maybe it's just some random guest. We've all been there. We've all had somebody that has been, right over our shoulder the entire day trying to just tell us everything to do. I would say that when I first got started, it was really hard for me, because I'm a people pleaser and I just want everybody to be happy. And so a lot of times I would just, kind of go with what everyone else was saying, even if I didn't really feel like it was the best option, because I was just trying to, keep the peace and just trying to make sure everybody was happy. I would say now, because I've just been doing this for so long, there will come a point where you are getting clients, for the most part, not always, but there does come a point where your price point, just with your experience, just with the weddings that you get going, where your couples just trust you more. They are paying you a certain amount for a reason, and they will step back and let you do your thing. Again, not always, but I would say 99% of the time, our brides are so trustworthy of us and our experience and our expertise that they will do whatever we tell them. And the same thing goes. They've let their family know. It's like, hey, we've hired these professionals. They know what they're doing. Please just let them do their thing. So I would say now, because I've been doing this for so long, I don't have a problem being like, hey, you know what? I understand that you think that would be a better spot to do these pictures, but let me explain to you why it's not. And then I'll explain to him the lighting, the shadows, the the hot, like a lot of times people don't understand that you don't want to stand outside in 95-degree weather in the middle of August doing your family pictures when there's a nice shady spot over here. Granted, it might not be against the river. We had a wedding once where the family was just so adamant that we had the river in the background for this wedding. And it was so hot that day. I mean, so hot. You stepped out in the sun for more than 2 minutes and you were just dripping with sweat. But they had this beautiful property with huge willow trees, just absolutely gorgeous, greenery in the shade that kept us cooler. It wasn't the river, but whatever. So I was like, well, let's just start over here. Let's just keep ourselves cool as much. And we can do a bunch of pictures here. And then if you like, we'll do a couple. We weren't out in that sun by the river for more than 5 minutes before every single one of them was like complaining and like this was hot. The poor little ring bearer was honestly throwing up from like heat stroke. Not my fault. I will tell you, it was not my fault. But he was like getting sick because it was just so hot out there. And I was trying so hard to just like move quickly, keep them in the shade. We had water, keep people hydrated. But this is where you have to just have the courage to step in and take control, because if not, you will get people that are just they just make things go so much longer, and they just, they make things a little bit difficult. So again, that just is something that comes with practice. It's not something that you're going to be great at first, but as you get experience and as you get confidence, you'll be able to start standing up for yourself and being like, nope, I'm in charge. This is what we're doing. What are some common struggles with the job? Some of the biggest struggles I would say that we have with this job is one, it's very seasonal. So you have your slower season, which is great. It always comes at a really good time. But when we're in the middle of our busy season, it is go, go, go. And we're right now getting to that point where from now until about the end of October, it is just like 100 miles an hour, pretty much nonstop. And while that can be a really wonderful thing, it also can just lead to burnout really, really quickly. And so over the years, we've had to put in a lot of systems and a lot of strategies in place to help us keep organized and keep things flowing, so that as we're just shooting a lot during these summer months, during the warmer months, that we can stay on top of things and we can at least try to help so that we're not getting burnt out so quickly. Also, there comes a point where you raise your prices, you take on less work, but you're still making the same amount or more. And, that is something that we've been doing over the last 4 or 5 years. We've been really, working on raising our pricing and just starting to kind of hone in on a little bit more of a niche market so that we can, just not have to be shooting quite as much. We have a family and we're wanting to make sure that we're utilizing our time between work and family as much as possible. I would say just some of the other common struggles are just running your own business is difficult. There's no off. There's no leaving your job at home or, leaving work and going home. It's always here. People can access you at all times. I have brides and clients that text me at 11 p.m. sometimes on Sunday nights or on other times. And you set those boundaries. You don't have to reply back, but sometimes they expect you to be getting back to them right then at that exact minute. And if you don't, they're contacting you again. I've had people that have emailed me and I haven't gotten right back to them within the first, hour that they sent it. And then I'm getting a text message and then I'm getting an Instagram DM. And it's like, hey, I'll get back to you as soon as I'm able to, And that can be hard sometimes running your own business because your customer service, your accountant, all of these things, we outsource a lot of stuff, but there's still so much that falls just on our shoulders. And that can be a struggle because you're just feeling like you're constantly pulled in a lot of different directions. How many events do we shoot a month? That is a great question. And it really just kind of depends on what time of the year it is. A few years ago, we were shooting something like close to 35 weddings a year, where we have dropped that down because we just don't want to be shooting quite that much anymore. It really is taxing on a young family, and with a lot of travel. We live in a nice hub location where we're a couple hours from Boise, we're a couple hours from Sun Valley. We shoot both of those locations a lot, and it's hard to be gone every single weekend for months and months out of the year. And so during our busy season, we could shoot anywhere from, 2 to 5 weddings a month. In our slowest season, we might not, we might only shoot one corporate project and maybe 1 or 2 portrait sessions. So it's kind of hard to gauge that just because, the months of May to October are going to be way busier. During the month of October, I'm shooting almost every single day. I will be doing 4 or 5 rounds of mini sessions. We usually have 3 or 4 weddings the month of October, plus senior sessions, family set. For the month of October is almost always the busiest month of the year for photographers, and I'm typically shooting almost every single day. So that compared to like February is different, but it balances out throughout the whole year. Do I normally shoot with another person or do I shoot alone? This really just, again, depends on the situation. As I've said before, my husband and I work together, so he does the video, I do the photo. But every once in a while, we will have assistants or second shooters come with us. They're just people that we contract out. They're not like employees of our business or anything. They're just friends and photographers in the industry that we can call upon and say, hey, this wedding's really big, or we need to be in multiple locations on the wedding day, so we need a second set of hands. Most of our weddings, though, our couples are hiring just myself and my husband. I feel like between the two of us, we can knock out a wedding day really successfully, and there isn't always a need for another shooter or another set of hands. So typically it's just the two of us, or sometimes, if it's a photography only wedding and they didn't hire video, I'll just go by myself. Do you get to eat all of the food at the weddings? Yeah, for the most part we do, and that's usually one of the best things about being a wedding photographer is we get super yummy food almost every single weekend, throughout the summer. But there has been a couple times at weddings where they didn't have vendor meals or they ran out of food. I had one wedding where I took the couple out to do sunset pictures, and they had like a buffet kind of appetizer, and that was all they had. They didn't have like an official dinner. They just had a lot of like hors d'oeuvres and appetizer type things. And by the time we got back in, all the food was gone. I felt really bad because they didn't even get to eat, but that's only happened at one wedding. Typically there's way too much food, but they just didn't order enough. So I think somebody ended up running and getting them like McDonald's or something, honestly, so they had something to eat at their wedding. But for the most part, yeah, we're getting food, or if we aren't eating the actual like wedding meal, sometimes we've had like pizza brought in or other things like that. But they are long days, and we are sometimes starting at 10 o'clock in the morning, and we're not getting done until 10 p.m. And so we're starting at 10 a.m. We're usually not eating dinner till closer to maybe like 6 or even 7 o'clock. And so we will make sure that we bring snacks, and we have lots of stuff in our car, lots of water and different things, so that we're making sure that we're keeping ourselves fed, because from the time that we get there until dinner, there's rarely a break, and we are just like going the whole time. If you're starting your own business, how do you even go about getting pricing for packages? So this is a really complex question, and there's not really a straightforward right answer, because it's gonna differ depending on, who you are, where you are, what you're shooting. You can do research and you can find out what other photographers are charging and price yourself so that you are in, accordance with the market. But a lot of times it's just gonna come down to practice and experience and just gaining that your footing as you start to shoot. One of the best things that you can do is just get a lot of work underneath. I personally didn't shadow under someone. Looking back now, I wish that there was an opportunity for me to do it. But at the time when I was starting out with photography, there was a very big division in the photography realm. You had a lot of, I'm going to say, old school photographers that were still doing things a very certain way. And then we had this new, like, kind of emergence, honestly, of the social media era, right? So we had all these people that were starting to shoot, and they were shooting for social media purposes, right? Like, they were getting stuff so that it could be shared on Facebook. And Instagram wasn't a thing when I very first started, but it became a few years later. But the younger photographers like me were wanting to do things just different. We were shooting differently. We were lighting things differently. We were using settings differently. And a lot of the older school photographers were really like put out by that. Natural light was really becoming super popular. Photographers that weren't using any sort of off-camera lighting at all. And that was like not okay. That was not a thing. Photographers that were offering digital images only instead of prints. That was also I was right when I started my business. It was like right during that whole kind of division in the photography industry. And it was actually really, really hard. A lot of photographers were extremely standoffish. No, there was not a lot of community in the photography industry. It was very, very competitive. You weren't friends with other photographers. You weren't sharing information. You weren't sharing locations. I feel like now the way the photography industry is, so much more of it is community. People are willing to help out. I had a wedding where I was like really sick, and I was reaching out to other photographers to find like somebody that might be willing to help out, to come shoot with us, and just be willing to like take over if I couldn't make it or do it. We got COVID back last year, and we had to reach out and start trying to like find other people who could like help us, because we ended up not being able to shoot a wedding because we got COVID. And when I first started, I would have been left high and dry. Like, that's just how the photography community was. And so it's gotten very different. But the reason why I was saying all of this is because now I feel like it's just so much easier to reach out to a photographer that you could go shadow, that you could go intern with, that would be willing to have somebody that, hey, you want to come carry my bag at weddings for a summer? Like, absolutely. I will like help you learn everything that you need to know, and you are going to get hands-on, first-rate experience faster than anything else. So that is what I would suggest. Find somebody who you really look up to, that you love, and be willing to go put in the work. A lot of young photographers, not little photographers, a lot of young photographers really aren't willing to necessarily go and just like learn, go gain that experience. They're wanting to just get started, get shooting, get making money. And while there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, you're missing out on an opportunity of getting hands-on experience right in the thick of things, because there's no better way to learn how to shoot a wedding than to be at a wedding. You can't practice it if you're not there. And it's nerve-wracking, and it's hard to get going with weddings if you haven't ever had really any experience. So that would be my suggestion, is to just find somebody that you could maybe intern with. Be willing to work really hard for them. Be willing to go the extra mile. Be willing to sacrifice some things to be in that environment, and then just shoot. Practice makes perfect. Shoot in all different kinds of environments. This is why I think wedding photography is one of the best forms of photography that you can do, because you can't control so many things. There are times on wedding days where we are getting thrown into environments that are a nightmare to shoot. Dark churches, really low light, really yellow light, absolutely no shade at, a wedding venue. So many things that I can control. If I take a senior, a high school senior out to do their pictures, I'm going to pick the best location where I know the light is going to be the best. I'm going to make sure there's no wind. I am going to control the timing. We're going to take our time between poses and shooting. Wedding days are not like that. You get what you get, and you have to make the best of it. And the more you can just get into so many different environments, because every single wedding is going to be different, you're going to just be able to practice shooting in all different kinds of elements, and you're going to learn really quickly. Does it stay fun, or does it get old pretty fast doing what you do? I've been shooting for, like I said, over a decade. I truly do love what I do, but there does come a point where you will start to get used to doing things. You will have a rhythm, you will have a comfort zone, and it can get really old when you aren't pushing yourself past like creative limits. And so that has been something where, we've kind of been there the last few years. We've been so busy raising a family, making sure we have a life outside of our business, doing all of these things, that it's really easy to just get into going through the motions. To just like, we know what works. We know we shoot at the same venues a lot. It's like, I just know exactly where to shoot at the exact same time of day. I know what works. I know what posing works. I know what cues work. And it can get a little monotonous. It can get to a point where you're like, I'm shooting the same wedding again, even though it's a different couple, different whatever, different colors. It kind of can all blend together and feel the same. So, but I don't think it has to be that way. I don't think it has to stay that way, but you do have to push yourself outside of that comfort zone. Maybe learn a new technique, go out and do shoots that are just for fun, that have nothing, that no one's hiring you for. Just simply getting out and letting those creative juices flow, because that's why we get started in this industry, right? That's what draws us here, is that ability to create, that ability to connect with people. And so when we do get going through those motions, I think it's always really important that we separate and try to do something that gets that creative juice just flowing again. How do you handle the stress of capturing such a big moment? Practice. That's the biggest answer I can have, is that it just takes practice. The more you do it, the more confident that you will become, the more you will start to realize that weddings all have a lot of the same rhythm. Yes, they're all different. Family dynamics are different. Venues are different. but they're all relatively the same. Ceremonies end up being really the same. I will make sure that I always talk to the officiant before the ceremony. Say, what is happening right before the kiss? Is it vows? Is it exchanging of the rings? Is there a prayer? What is happening right before that moment so that I know when they're doing the rings, I need to get myself back into a position so that I'm ready for that first kiss. Because it has happened before where I was like, the ceremony's happening and I will move to the sides, so I'll be shooting in the middle a little bit. I'll move out to one side. I'll move around to the other side. And there's been a couple of times where I have been on the side when suddenly they're getting ready to do the kiss and I'm like, wait a minute, that shouldn't be happening right now. They either skipped something or it just went really, really quickly. And I've had to book it back around to get to where I'm framing, their first kiss right, or they've gotten a first kiss shot from a side angle. It's not really the end of the world. It's not typically the shot that I would want, but sometimes that's just how it goes. But that's when it was like, okay, I need to make sure that I know exactly what is happening before the first kiss so that I am positioned appropriately so that I can capture that moment right when it happens. But other than that, yeah, it really just takes practice. It just is something that you'll get more comfortable with the more that you do. And the more different environments that you get into and the scenarios that you shoot, you'll be more confident. I feel now that I've been doing this long enough that I could show up to a wedding tomorrow, never having met the couple, never having shot at the venue, not having any information whatsoever, and I feel like I could shoot a wedding, I could be completely fine. That is just kind of where we've gotten now to this point. We send out questionnaires to all of our brides. We work through strategic timelines. We are very organized and we set things up so that when we go shoot a wedding, there is no question of what we're going to be doing when and who needs to be involved during certain times. But that is honestly more for my bride's peace of mind than it is for mine. Obviously, yes, I will utilize those things and I want to make sure that I'm organized throughout the day. But I honestly feel like I could go shoot a wedding without having anything of that done and probably be fine. But that is the other big thing. If you're wanting to get into shoot at weddings, you've got to just be organized. That is one of the biggest things. Constant communication, organizing, setting up timelines, just making sure that you know what you're doing and when you're doing it, and making sure that everybody else that's involved in the wedding has the same schedule. We are at a point now where we actually work with a lot of wedding planners. It wasn't like that when we first started. As you build, as you grow, as you raise your prices, you start to tap into a different market of weddings. We're now at a place where we typically are shooting a lot with venue coordinators, with wedding day planners. And so we have someone else that's on our team that's helping to coordinate all of those things. And that makes my job a little bit easier to not have to be worrying about that. Because if a wedding doesn't have a planner, if they don't have a coordinator, it typically falls on the photographer. I need to be the one that's in control of the timeline, because if not, then I'm going to be playing catch up all day long. So that is another place where photographers just have to step in. They have to step in and they have to take control of the schedule of the day if somebody else isn't doing it. We will work hand in hand with DJs as well to make sure that we're in accordance with them. That's the thing. That's the part where, the community really is important. When we're on a wedding day, every single vendor that is at a wedding, we're all on the same team. And there should never be competitiveness. There should never be fighting for time. That is something that has to be completely left off the table, because we're there for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to make sure that our couples have the most amazing day possible. And if you have vendors that are, trying to undercut each other, it's just not going to work. And there's no point in that, because we all have the same goal. We want our couples to have the best day ever. We want them to have the most wonderful experience. We want them to leave their wedding feeling like we all did the most amazing job. And so I have started to see again over the last, probably 6 or 7 years, that community just really build. We all refer each other out. We all love when we shoot together or when we work together, showing up to a wedding, having hair and makeup artists that we know, having DJ that we know, having caterers that we know. It just feels like a family. It really does. And that is something that a lot of people, I think, don't experience in other careers necessarily. I mean, I'm sure they do in some instances, but that is one thing that the wedding industry has that I think a lot of other people don't, is just this really big sense of family. And, we've all got each other's backs for the most part, and that just makes things a lot more easy when things can be really stressful. I just want to thank you guys so much for asking me all of these questions. I really enjoyed answering them. I hope that this was helpful to you guys in any way. Mr. Lewis, if you have other questions that your students have, follow us on Instagram or shoot us an email. I'm always happy to talk to any, students or any kids who are interested in pursuing photography, because it can be a really tricky career field to go into, especially nowadays, because it's very different from when I started. When I first got started, there wasn't Instagram. There really wasn't a lot of social media. I had Facebook, but it was very different then than what it is now. And everybody's a photographer. Everybody's a content creator. People nowadays that don't have any interest in being a wedding and portrait photographer have really great skills at video and photography because they need it for their social media platforms. So it can be a little bit tricky to navigate. And I'm grateful that we have been able to grow our business before the really big surge of social media, because our business grew strictly from word of mouth. We didn't do a ton of marketing. I really am not even great on Instagram. If you follow our Instagram, I post like once every 2 months, I think. Like I'm just not great about it, but that's because we haven't really needed to utilize it. Fortunately for us, we still get majority of our referrals are from clients. They're from past clients. They're from vendors, other peers in the industry. We get a lot of Google and YouTube referrals, or people will find us from Google because we've got a lot of stuff out on our website and everything. But for the most part, yeah, it's a lot of word of mouth. And so, it can be tricky to navigate building your business with so much going on out there and so many different people and so much content being created and so much photography just already out there. So I'm always happy to answer questions, always happy to help out. We shoot weddings in the Sun Valley, Boise area a lot. So if anybody is ever interested in wanting to tag along and learn more about weddings, hit us up and let us know, because we are always willing to have somebody come and help carry gear and just be an extra set of hands on a wedding day. So thanks again for having me. I appreciate it so much.